kind of looking at you all while we were just waiting. A couple of people laughing in my face. So encouragement right at the start. So just looking like, hey, cheers. So John Thompson's moved to the front row deliberately to encourage me. So that's good. I won't be looking at him. What we're going to do today, we're going to look at 2 Chronicles. Chapter 34, so 2 Chronicles, chapter 34, so it's kind of probably just about halfway through, just under halfway through the Old Testament. So I'll give you kind of a second to find that, but I'm going to start by kind of just talking about being out of your depth and stuff like that. So a few of us went on a stag do last night for Cliff, or yesterday, all day, really, and very, very much kind of a male thing, as you'd imagine. So dodgeball in the morning, which got overly competitive, and then there was this weird thing where everyone was in these big bubbles, so your legs were out and you're in this giant like hamster wheel, inflatable, and basically it seemed that people ran into each other for an hour. I did not do that, so I would break into a million pieces. And then we went into this thing that I've talked about before, where we get locked in a room, you get an hour to solve puzzles and get out. And my group got out with 6 minutes to go, so we were feeling all smug. And then we spoke to Cliff, and we said, how long did you take to get out? And said, we got out in the last minute. And we're thinking, well, we'll beat you then, Cliff. And I spoke to the other guys, and they said, we got out with 18 minutes to spare. And I was like, you're not human if your initial response isn't like, well, that was an easy room, wasn't it? And so I was like, very petty. I just said to them, that must have been very easy, though. Very easy. It can't be that you're cleverer than us at all. So we're going to look at a guy here called King Josiah. And King Josiah, we're going to see, was a guy who was initially certainly out of his depth. And it's never pleasant to be in a place where you are out of your depth. A few years ago, me and a few guys, we were at a church in Widnes with Lucas. We used to do this annual mission to Spain. And so every year we'd kind of go to Spain and kind of just share our stories in the streets and that kind of stuff. And my job in the first year, because I had a gap year with me and 7 women, so my job, other than just avoiding them for most of my spare time, so I had sanity, so I took a football goal to Spain. So I had to carry a 5-a-side football goal from England to Spain, like we could fly, and then like march it over. So I kind of carried it all the way through Barcelona and in hostels. It was very annoying. But then we got there, and I kind of had this penalty shootout thing. Whereas if these kids came up and if they scored 3 goals past me, then I'd sit on a chair and they'd throw wet sponges at me. So all good fun. And as a kind of a reward for that, they'd have to listen to my testimony for kind of 5 minutes, and that was the kind of deal. So I thought I'll learn some Spanish. Now my Spanish wasn't great, but I attempted to learn some Spanish, and so I kind of learned like, who's your favourite footballer? Do you play football? What position do you play? All those kind of questions and responses, so I could at least hold some form of conversation. Because the Spaniards were a cheating bunch, I also learned very quickly that Spanish for 1 step, because that's all you were allowed on those penalties. You weren't allowed a big run-up, because it was like this tiny ball, so I was like, un paso, and then kids would be stepping back 3 times, no, because I don't want to get wet. And so I learned 1 step, I learned tres goals equals is not Spanish, tres goals equals esponjas, which is sponges, which they're all very excited at the chance to soak the Englishmen. It was very good. So I'd learned some stuff. And Lucas, however, not so good at the Spanish, it's fair to say, didn't make much of an effort, and so just, the absolute stereotypical Englishman abroad, completely out of his depth, just bundling around, looking for anyone who would respond to his loud English. That's all he would do. Alright, mate! That's not going to work, Lucas, I learned something now. And so, in the end of the kind of holiday, Lucas was driving back and he was a bit lost. He was trying to find the airport and he was getting stressed because they were going to be late for their flights, and he was thinking, oh my goodness, I've got 7,000 children, and so therefore it's going to cost me like £1 million with these delayed flights. And so he ran into this garage to ask where the airport was, but obviously he has no Spanish, and so he kind of runs in and it's like, where is the airport? And they're like, okay, and he's like, alright, I'll do the classic English thing, and he just went, airport, mate, airport. The Spanish for airport, I think, is like aeroport. So they would have known, like, it's a bit mean, but the Spanish can be mean. And so they just went, oh, okay. And so he went, and he looked the man in the eye, and he said, don't make me do this. And so he just went, right. And he put his arms out, and he did an aeroplane noise. And he was like, where? And he goes, and laughed in his face and just pointed. And I was like, Good work, Lucas. Good work. So Lucas is a man who's very much out of his depth in Spain, as you can well imagine. So they are on holiday in an English-speaking country, so we'll be all right this time. So we're going to look at King Josiah. It's our resident Palm Sunday. We will talk about Jesus as well before people come up and take you down. So King Josiah is a king that's in kind of the king of Judah, king of the kind of southern kingdom, the king of Judah. And so we're going to see at the time of the kings, we'd had a situation where God's people had been led out of Egypt into the promised land, and kind of for ages God said, look, you're not having a king, you can't have a king, you don't need a king, you've got me. And eventually they kind of kept going, and God gave him some kings. And the thing with the kings is if you could kind of draw a graph of good kings and bad kings, it really kind of is all over the place. There's a couple of good ones, there's a whole load of bad ones, and then a good one pops up, and then some bad ones. So it's a very kind of difficult book in many ways, because you think, oh, it's going well, and then the next king will come in and it'll be terrible, and it'll all go badly again. And Josiah comes in after two of the worst kings that there were. Like Josiah's granddad, it says, like, was, you know, as evil as they come. He had loads of false gods. He put idols in the temple. They kind of established the thing where they'd have kind of male prostitutes living in the temple quarter. It was a mess. You know, at one point his granddad sacrificed his own son to kind of say, oh, this will please the gods. Like, this guy was fully evil. And then he kind of reigned for 55 years, and then his son took over. So Josiah's dad took over, and he was only king for 2 years. And it said he was so evil, he carried on. And then after 2 years, his officials just killed him. And then Josiah becomes king at 8 years old. And so at 8 years old, this guy is kind of thrust into being king, which obviously, those of you who know a little bit about history will know that we've had in England many kings of kind of young age. But there he is, kind of 8 years old, kind of way out of his depth, kind of thinking, right, my dad was evil, he's been murdered. My granddad was like the most evil king. And so you kind of expect this is just going to get worse and worse and worse. And we're going to see that Josiah turns out to be potentially one of the best kings that they've ever had. And he's probably one of my favourite characters. And because the thing with Josiah is that we can see, as we'll go through this story, Josiah was a guy who knew nothing without God. He had no heritage, he had no background. And people would say, yeah, but he was king, so there's a slight advantage in what he's able to do, which is fair. You know, but the fact is that he had no kind of reason to know anything about God. And it says that, kind of, as we'll see, that Josiah just saw God with his heart. And in the story, Josiah kind of finds the book of the law, the Bible at the time, that had gone missing. And he reads it, and he realises how far his nation is from God. And he goes, oh, we need to change. And he transforms his nation. And we're going to see that he gets rid of all these things holding them back. And he calls them back, and he brings them back to God. And so this guy out of nowhere, this kind of fatherless kid with a terrible kind of past, comes in, and God changes his heart. And one of the reasons it kind of is a great kind of story for me is he kind of just thinks, like, no matter what your background is, whether it's been good, bad, average, it doesn't matter. Like, in this church, we are a church full of a kind of wide variety of people. You know, like, there will be some people, like me and my wife Anna, who we have been literally in the church system forever. Like, our parents are like church mafia. Like, they are worship leaders, they are leaders. Like, my dad did the old overhead projector in the old days when you didn't have screens and you had to move an acetate down. He wasn't the best at it, and so often we'd be on the wrong verse and we'd all go silent because he'd be like just looking at the floor. Bless him, he didn't last long on that. And so we've gone all, but even the two of us, even though we both had this kind of mafia-esque church background, like, our stories are so different. Like, those of you who kind of heard me before have heard many times that my kind of struggle and kind of really wrestling against church and not wanting to be there, but it doesn't have to be that way. Like, Anna's story is very much that she was kind of this kind of woman who knew God from such an early age, and she didn't have this kind of big argument about not wanting to go to church. There's a story for me that sums up kind of Anna as a young woman and how she kind of knew God and sought God, which is very different, as we'll see, to what I was like when I was in my teenage years. But she went away to Soul Survivor, and she was in this meeting, and in this meeting they kind of said, right, we're going to wait on God and just receive the Holy Spirit. So Anna just stood there, she had her hands out, she was praying, she had her eyes shut, and so she just waited on God, and waited on God, and waited on God, and without her knowing, the seminar finished, everybody left, which is terrible scenes, but everybody left, and then she opens her eyes, and the next seminar have all come in, they're all sat around her, so she's just stood in the middle of this room, and the person who's about to start the next seminar is at the front with a microphone going, so she goes, oh. So nobody thought to like tap her on the shoulder and say, hey, do you know what, we're finishing now? And they just left her to it. And so the next seminar I was like, oh right, okay, there's a woman just stood up, we can't interrupt her. So they just all waited, and then she was, okay, And then she gets her wellies on and just squelches out, so it's all silent as squelch. And so that's kind of her story. She's this kind of woman who have known God from an early age, and Josiah was there, and we'll see that he knew God from a really early age, not because he'd been taught in the ways of God. So there'll be people like me who were taught in church and just kind of rebelled against it and just really kind of thought, I just hate this, it's doing my head in. And it took me ages and ages and ages. Like, I didn't have these kind of experiences. I know at 14, I would go away to kind of these conferences and be like, God, just give me another chance because I'm hanging on here. And it would just be real almost desperation. And part of the kind of growth is when I hit 15, a bunch of us, we kind of had a couple of older lads at 17, 18. And after youth on a Friday, we would just kind of drive out to the country, we would hang out, we would get kebabs, and we would chat about life. We'd find like car parks in Asda's and Morrison's, we were a floodlight, and we'd play football at 3 a.m, which is definitely not what you're doing at 15, because you should be studying. So I don't know what my parents just gave up. And so like work hard at school, work hard at school, work hard. It's GCSEs, yeah, I don't know. And so seemingly not interested. It was a difficult kind of journey. And there'll be many people in here that have not grown up in church at all. Many kind of stories that we would hear will be people who just kind of say, I've got no background, I've got no right to be in a church. And the kind of what we're going to see here is it can be that that's your story, you've been in church, you might have just a kind of normal life in terms of just a normal person, you've had a decent job, life is good, but actually Jesus can still come in. He's not just there for those of us who are in an absolute mess. He's not just there for those of us who grow up in church. He's there for us who are going, life is fine, and we meet Jesus, and we think, actually, life is fine, but it can be so much better. And as we jump in to the passage in 2 Chronicles 34, it says, I'll start right at the start of the chapter. It says, Josiah was 8 years old and became king. He reigned in Jerusalem for 31 years. He did what was right in the eyes of the Lord, and walked in the way of his father David, not turning to the right or the left. And then in the 8th year of his reign, while he was still young, he began to seek the God of his father David. And then it carries on to, we'll get into the next bit in a second, it carries on to say what he then did, because as he kind of began to seek God, things started to change. But at this stage, Josiah still hasn't found the Bible. The Bible, that's kind of at the time, the book of the law that was there, still lost. But at this point, even though he knows nothing, he's still a man who's seeking God. So we don't come to God with our kind of knowledge and needing to have all these kind of answers. We come to God wherever we're at. Since we started this church, we've had a couple of baptisms. And in those kind of baptisms, we've had a whole wealth of stories. We've had people whose lives have been really traumatic and so difficult. We've had people who grew up in church and walked away and then came back. We've had people who've just been kind of, life's been good, but then they found Jesus. And the next set of baptisms we've got in June, we've got some people again who kind of just came brand new to church and heard about Jesus. We've also got somebody who kind of grew up in church and has been in church all their life. And so the kind of message that we've got with Jesus is that it's literally the doors are wide open. One of my favourite testimonies that I heard when I was back home was, I was about to say where I grew up, but John's told me he bets I say at least 3 times my town, so I'm not going to mention it at all. So where I grew up, there was this kind of guy, and he was such a happy guy, and he came and played for our church team once when we played this local five-a-side league, and it was rough. Like, we were there as the Baptist Church. We could have given ourselves a cooler name, but we didn't. We went in under the name that somewhere, Baptist Church. And so a lot of teachers thought, do you know what we can do for the Baptist boys? We can keep them around, because they can't fight us because they're Christians. Which is a good tactic looking back, to be fair. And so it was tough at times. And the first time he ever played, we were playing against a team called the All Blacks, and they were the roughest of the rough. Like, they were rough as toast. It was bad scenes. And so I scored a goal against them once, and the goalkeeper came out, and with a bit more language than this, he said, you do that again, and I'll come for you. And I had just scored a goal. And it wasn't like, we hadn't had a tackle, there was no foul, it was just like, yeah, you're not allowed to score. And the guy came into it, is it always like this? I went, well, not always, but yeah, sometimes. And he was just grinning his way through, as people were chopping his legs from underneath him. He was like, that was fun, wasn't it? Like, nose hanging off his face and stuff like that. And so, but when he got baptised, his story was, do you know what, my life's been great. I've loved my life, I've got a good job, and blah, blah. And he said, do you know what, right recently I became a Christian. He said, Jesus is so much better. And I was like, that's great, because we're so used to hearing these stories of, how bad life has been, and then it's been transformed. But actually, life can be alright, and as we meet Jesus, it can be so much better than it ever was. And so as we see that Josiah knew nothing. He knew nothing about the kind of Bible, his history was poor, and he's a man who knew what it was to be transformed, because as we're going to see, his nation was in an absolute state. And the next kind of few verses of 2 Chronicles 34, we're not going to read them all because there's a lot of them, but I'll just summarise what it says he did. He kind of be able to get rid of the high places, some Asherah poles to false gods, some carved idols, some images. He smashed the incense altars that were above him. He smashed the poles. He broke them to pieces. And then he burns the bones of some priests. Let's skip over that bit. And then there's some other things. So it's all about kind of like getting rid of this witchcraft and these people who are really kind of rotting his nation. And like we said, there was these kind of male prostitutes just housed in the temple. So we can kind of look at our society and our lives and think, yeah, things are tough. And I remember hearing some guy preach once, and he said we can kind of quote stats about how bad our areas are, how tough it is to do youth work where we do youth work. And we can quote these stats like how many people have got bad lives, how many people in this place go to prison or whatever. And he said, and the danger is with that we can kind of say, well, yeah, but it might be dark where you live, but it's dark where I live. And we kind of just go, oh, it's so bad where I live. But if we look at Josiah's time, you know, we certainly isn't any particularly better than our time. It's not like, well, yeah, it was easy for him. This young king of 16 years old, whose dad had been murdered, he starts going, no, I'm going to change this nation, I'm going to take these things down. And, you know, he would have been a guy who could have still been killed. You know, obviously these people had killed his dad, so he was a guy who, as he made this stand, would have been able to, you know, would have been confronted with a lot of kind of criticism and a lot of difficulties. But he made his stand in his nation. There's a great quote that Mike Pillow actually always kind of puts on Twitter, and he says, like, God doesn't choose the qualified, but he qualifies the chosen. And he doesn't just kind of say, right, who's the best at this? Let me pick that one. You know, when we see Jesus, one of the great things about Jesus is he goes after, so often he goes after the ordinary people, the lost people, the broken people. Because I think sometimes that God knows that we are not the cleverest, and we need to get it. And so if he had just kind of gone, right, I'll go to the kings and the leaders, everyone would go, well, yeah, that makes sense, of course you would. But, you know, I'm not like them, you can't come from me. But over and over again, Jesus goes for the kind of people who've got very little to offer, except themselves, very little to offer, except they will follow you. You know, and I think God's saying, you know, maybe dropping heavy hints, that we don't need to have all this kind of stuff. We can come to him as we are, with our kind of lack of knowledge, with our kind of questions, with our baggage, going, God, I trust in you, but I don't really know what that means. And as we'll see, God's not going to leave us there. We don't just kind of do that and then 10 years later we're in the same place. God will teach us and he'll move us on, as we'll see. And so the second thing that we're going to see, so the first thing is that Josiah sought God just as a young man. And in 2 Chronicles 34, we're going to skip ahead to verse 14. And we're going to see this is the part where we find the Bible. It says in verse 14, it says, when they were bringing out the money that had been taken into the temple, Hilkiah the priest found the book of the law that had been given through Moses. He said to Shaphan the secretary, I found the book of the law in the temple. He gave it to Shaphan. Then he took it to the king and said to him, we're doing everything, your officials are doing everything that's been committed to them. They've paid out the money that's in the temple and have entrusted it to the supervisors and workers. Then the secretary informed the king, we found that Hilkiah the priest has found the book. And he read from it in the presence of the king. And when the king heard the words of the law, he tore his robes. And so they find this Bible, and they read it out to the king, and the king tears his robes. And I cannot help but whenever I hear someone tearing their robes in the Bible, again, you've got to go to the Incredible Hulk, haven't you? Like most of us, surely. You just don't think about people tearing their clothes. And like, we had this one friend that I used to work with as a mild-mannered accountant, and we called him the Hulk because he was like this nice, quiet guy. 6 of us studied our accountancy lectures together, so you can imagine, they weren't wild times. But this guy was very nice. But when he flipped, man alive, he could flip. And it was quite funny at times. And so like, we were doing this mock exam, and me and this other guy hadn't studied that well for his mock exam, and we would just say, oh mate, this is hard. And he was going, yeah, this is hard. Do you know anything? I don't know that much. Do you know anything? And he was getting really stressed because he was taking the exam very seriously, as he should have done. And he was getting really annoyed with me because I was obviously being quite annoying. And so instead of just kind of just saying, look, Dad, can you shut up? He just let it build up and build up and build up. And then he just exploded. And he just stood up and he knocked his table flying across the room. Everyone everywhere, we're all going to die. And he just stormed out. And they just didn't come back. Like, not ever. He came back eventually. Like, he didn't come back. He obviously went and did his exam somewhere else because he just couldn't handle it. And we're like, be careful with Gary. His name is Gary Mears, and I always get confused with Gary Myers. Well, you are not like Gary. Gary did once do some ninjutsu on me, and nearly broke my arm in 9 places or something. It was unpleasant. But the other thing, and Gary Mears did my favourite ever thing, I would say, in terms of a sporting event. we were doing this in my old company. We had a sports day, which was very good. And we'd go, because we're accountants, it was a sports day. Let's be honest, the best was dodgeball, and then it kind of worked its way back from there. We did human table football. We were all kind of bungee strapped up at poles and that kind of stuff. But we did rounders at the end. That's the big finale. And Gary kind of went. He hit the ball, and then he ran to first base. The person kind of throwing it caught it on first base. He was out. But instead of just going, "Oh, I'm out," Gary just ignored this, and he just put his head down, and like a rhino, just went straight into this guy's chest, just headbutted him, and this guy just flew back onto his back. What has happened? And Gary just carried on, rounder and rounder, and no one dared say anything, and so he just went back into bat, and we were like, "What's just happened?" And we're like, everyone knew Gary was out, and I was like, "You want to tell him?" "I'm not telling him." "You want to tell him?" "Just right under, man." It was genuinely, I couldn't breathe for that day. And so it was absolutely amazing. But anyway, that's not what's happening here. Josiah is not going all kind of Hulk. Like when he kind of reads this in the Bible, he kind of hears how far his nation is from God. He's so kind of torn and so sorrowful. He's so kind of like, we are so far away. It was a sign of deep kind of anguish, rather than just rage. It was like, this is not how we were meant to live. My goodness, we are so far away. And it really impacts his heart. And there was years of kind of rejecting God and years of going away from God. And he sees the impact it's now having on his nation. And he's like, man alive, we are nowhere where we should be. And it just stirred him and it changed him to action. And maybe there's a quote I'm going to read from Tolkien, which is Lord of the Rings. I'm not a big Lord of the Rings man, don't get me wrong, but it is a good quote. And at the start, there's a few geeks in there. That's fine. The quote is that things that should not have been forgotten were lost. History became legend, and legend became myth. And the people of Israel would have known the story still about God. But there's a kind of phrase that says, a generation will know God, and if they're not careful, the next generation will just know about God, and then the next generation will know nothing. And so Josiah's in this place where he probably hears these stories, hears about God, but the kind of activity of people really in relationship with God is just gone. And he realises that they can come back to God and that they're in such a mess. And as he's kind of awakened, we'll see that it stirs him to action, because as our hearts are awakened, as our hearts are kind of moved by God, it just provokes a change in us, changes in what we do, changes in what we care about. And again, if you know nothing about the Bible, it's an intimidating book. It's a big book, isn't it? And so I read a kind of a Bible study technique, as it were, from a church leader, which really helped me in terms of, because sometimes you can kind of think, I need to read 3 chapters today, or I need to read a chapter today. And if you're not careful, you can just kind of think, I just need to. And so you box through your chapter and then you go out your business and you think, well, I've done it, haven't I? I've read the Bible, that counts. And but nothing's actually happened. And he said, what he does is he just kind of says, right, God, will you just speak to me through your word? And he kind of works with maybe a book of the Bible at a time or whatever. And he just says, right, God, just speak to me. And he reads until he feels God really touched him in his heart. And then he just stops. And he says sometimes he can be reading 3, 4, 5 or more chapters before something really leaps at him. And sometimes he said he can read 6 words and just goes, wow, that's for me. Because he said, because what he used to do is he'd read 6 words and think that's good, but then he'd read another 3 chapters, and actually he's forgotten what God kind of said because he just kind of read a lot more past it. And so now he just stops and goes, God, what is that about? And it's not about, some of you slackers will be thinking, that's great, you can do that in like a minute. That is not what we're saying. We're not saying, I tell you what guys, I find a great way you can read a Bible and it'll like take you 30 seconds. That is not what I am saying. I'm saying sometimes you can skip past what God's saying because we think we've got a duty to do more. And it's important to study the Word of God. It is important that we also read it to kind of get understanding and stuff, as well as just kind of saying, right, God, what are you saying to us today? We need to make sure we get a grasp on this, and that obviously does involve reading quite a bit. But there are times when now I've kind of taken this on, and I was reading 1 Peter, and it just like the start of 1 Peter, it says, to God's elect, strangers in the world. I just stopped and thought, God, am I a stranger in the world, really? And for that was it. And, I had to stop and just spend that time praying about areas where I am not a stranger in the world, areas where I am just the same, areas where I need to kind of think, I need to stand out, areas where I'm just the same as everybody else, and people wouldn't just day to day go, that man has got a spirit of something different in him, that man knows God well. And so the kind of thing, as I've done that more, we believe that God is a living God. He's not just a God who spoke to people in the old times. God speaks to us in our meetings here. He speaks to us so much through His Word. And so as we do it, I just kind of learn, rather than just doing it out of duty, it's just a case of seeing that expectation that God will speak. But if He does, we have to take it seriously.
because it leads to something. It doesn't just lead to me then going, I'm a stranger in the world, and then probably going, no, I'm not really, and then going about my day. It's about going, right, God, what needs to change? What actually needs to happen in my heart? What needs to be different about what I'm doing? Because, there's an open heart that listens to God, and it's a dangerous thing. And I think the enemy will try and close us off and just say, no, just keep reading, or even, you don't need to read today, because the enemy will not want people to go, do you know what, I haven't got much to offer, but I'm just going to I'll listen to God and see what he wants to say. Because that is a dangerous place for the enemy to find Christians in, because people who are listening to God could stir hearts and he can call us for dangerous things. And that is obviously quite scary, because you think, oh God, you call me to that, that's massive. And there's a reason it says in the Bible, do not fear, like 365 whatever time. It must be true, because Nicky Gumbel tweeted it. And so it says, he said it says do not fear in the Bible all the time. And again, because God knows, if there's something important, I have to drill this into these people. Because there are Christians here like Dell who need it, who say it a lot to get it. And if I say it a lot, he might just get it. If I say it once in there, he won't. And so when God calls us it calls us to kind of things that sometimes can scare us. And some of you will know, probably a year ago now, I kind of talked about this desire to do this mentoring thing in a school, and it just didn't really happen. We took it to the school, and the school weren't that bothered. The head teacher was up for it, and then he left, and it was just tough. We just hit a brick wall, and I was kind of a bit down about it. But then there is a part of you that thinks, oh well, I've tried, and now it's easier because I've tried. I'm guilt-free. I've tried, it didn't work, and I don't have to do anything now. I can just kind of sit off and I can watch telly, and so I kind of just let that slide. And then we did this passions thing that we're doing recently, and Ryan came and eyeballed me, and he said, there's the meeting about the kind of people who are passionate for the homeless on Monday, you come in. And I was kind of like, no, not really. And I was like, oh right. He said, I think you should come. I said, well, it wasn't one of the ones I ticked on the form, like that matters. And I said, it wasn't one of the ones I ticked on the form, man, the form, man, the form is it. If you're not on the form, then you will go home. And so, and he said, well, what do you want to do then? That's a bit direct question, right? That's all right, leave me alone. And I said, well, I tried to do this mentoring thing, and it didn't really happen. He said, well, why? What was it? I said, I've got this kind of passion for the fatherless. And he said, well, my passion for the homeless is that these are people who are on the streets. These are the orphans of today who don't have a father. And I thought, okay, right, I'm in. And I was like, you've done me, you've got me. I was like, that's a great argument. I was like, that's all right, so I'll come. And so I thought, right, and there was a part of me that just thought, it's easy to sit off. I've done my best, God. I don't need to do this anymore. And as I kind of turned up to that meeting, we see the passion of some of the guys in the meeting, I think, it's going to be so good. We're going to really reach out to people who just need to hear this message. And I thought I could have so easily gone, but that's not mine didn't come off. And as I did that, in the last 2 weeks, 2 people have come up to me and said, that mentoring thing, this school want to do it, and a doctor kind of emailed our church, and we don't even know who she is, so a random doctor said, we've seen you do this mentoring thing, what is it? And so all of a sudden this kind of now kicking off again out of nowhere, and so I think that sometimes God has to kind of awaken your heart, and he can then say, right, are you prepared to do it, or are you just going to go, I tried it and it didn't really work? Sometimes we have to kind of make sure that we're putting ourselves out there again. If God has spoken, it might take some time. We've got to be prepared to take that action. And it would always be easier to not do it. It would be always easy to go, I've got so much on, I could do this, I could do that. But you know what, if my heart's going to be broken for the fatherless, it's going to mean that I do something. It's going to mean that I go out of my house. And I have, in some ways, no experience of being fatherless. And I have a dad, he's a great dad. He's proper old now. And we went to see Question the Sport recently in Manchester. He came over, and it was all good, and we had lunch, and it was nice. And they say in Question Sport, don't shout out the answers, because, that's a problem. And so it was all going fine until the end, and he forgot himself. And so he's 83, and so at the end they try and describe something, and it was just like, where Scotland play rugby. And they won't get it for some reason, and my dad was very frustrated at this. And so he just turned to me, he's got a hearing aid, so he's got no concept of volume, and he just went, it's Murrayfield! I was like, Dad, it's a good job it's the end of the show, and you're 83. Because otherwise we're getting hoofed. And so a few people looked around, and I was like, cheers, Dad. So I don't know anything about kind of growing up without a dad, and I don't know anything about that. But there's something that God's put in me. I don't have any experience. Like Josiah didn't have loads of experience, but God had put something in his heart. And sometimes God will put stuff in our heart that's not because of our natural response to things. It's because God's put it in there himself. And the only thing I'd say about his heart being broken is that it's important that we give God a chance to speak, and we give him that opportunity. Because if we're not giving him that stillness and that quiet, well, how do we expect him to kind of really touch us and to break our hearts? And the final point is that Josiah removed the high places. So in 2 Chronicles 34, again I'm just going to summarise all those things that we talked about, where he got rid of those poles, he got rid of the false idols, he got rid of the prostitutes from the temple, and he goes on and he basically cleans out his land. He goes on and he sees all these things that have been there for years and years and years, that people keep coming back to, that people keep slipping back into, and he removes them. He thinks these need to go. You know, and there's a passage in Proverbs 26, it's a lovely passage, which says, as a dog returns to its vomit, so a fool returns to its folly. It's not my fault, it's in the Bible. I'm just quoting the Bible, and you can take that over God. So all I would say is, I have a biblical dog, because recently he was sick, and he was desperate to get back out there. I'm working from home, he's good, but sometimes your dog is sick, and that's annoying. And so he started making sick noises, so obviously I locked him in the garden, and so he was sick there, and I got him back in, because obviously he was like, this is the best thing in the world, I'm going to eat this. And so I got him back in, and I thought, I can't be bothered to go out there, it's raining. So I left him, and then I forgot that he was out there, and he was just like desperate to get back out there. And I was like, what is wrong with you, you sick dog? And so, poor training, whoever's responsible for that in our house. And so the thing is, these people, they were going back to these places over and over and over again, because these high places had not been removed. These places where people could still sacrifice children, they could still offer offerings to these false gods, they'd never been smashed up. And Josiah looked at them and said, if I leave these there, people will keep going back, they will keep doing it, and these things will keep rotting my nation. So he looked at them and said, these need to go. And so he went on this kind of big purge, and he kind of got rid of them. And we can kind of look at this kind of thing and think, how messed up is that you would have these kind of prostitutes just living in the temple? And as I was kind of saying that to Anna, she was like, but our bodies are like a temple. We are now a temple of the Holy Spirit. And we can let in so much junk and nonsense into our lives that we can kind of look at, how can that be acceptable? But actually we can let so much stuff that's not acceptable into our lives. And there is obviously a lot in our nation that needs to kind of come down, a lot in our nation that's messed up. But today I just want us to kind of look at things in our life, what strongholds, what high places are there in our lives that need to come down. And that can be sin that we go back to, that can be things that we really struggle to kick, but it can also be things such as fears that we let control us and just think, you know what, I can't do this because I'm so afraid and so bound by that. Or it can be pain that we've experienced in the past that we can just say, I can't do that, God, because it's too hard. And we can be so bound by these strongholds. And what we're going to do is we're going to just kind of spend some time praying into these kind of high places in this time, that these things that need to come down. Because 10 years ago, when I did that mission in Spain, right at the end, I did this football thing, and in the second town we went to, there was literally no kids. There was 2 teenage lads, and so all week, I spent this week with these 2 teenage lads, and so I was chatting to them with my terrible Spanish, they were chatting to me in their terrible English, which basically involved quoting footballers at each other and smiling, but that was fine. And so we did that, and I was trying to teach them, Clive Mendonca from my team was, and they looked blank, and I thought, let's leave it. And so I said, Steven Gerrard, I went, yeah, I thought, that'll do. We'll go with Steven Gerrard. I pretended I liked Liverpool for a week. It was very dirty. And so it was very shameful. And so the things you do for the gospel, eh? And so, but then it got to the end of the week, and I thought, I need to just get a translator and just say to these guys, can I just tell you my story? And so I knew that I needed to do that. I prayed for these guys for the whole week. And then when it came down to it, that final day, all I did was say, guys, you want to come to church? And they went, oh no, we can't, we're going to a bullfight, because they were stereotypically Spanish. I was like, you really go to bullfights in this country? Weirdos. And so I was like, alright, fine. And then I knew I needed to just go and get a translator, but for some reason, there's that party that just thought, oh, it's not worth it, they can't even come. And I just kind of gave up and went home. And then literally at the end of my gap year, I just thought, I have failed. And I just thought, I'm just fed up. I'm fed up of failing. It was a pattern that I'd started to see in my life. I started stuff well, but I always just seemed to finish it so poorly and just seemed to get off to a good start and just fail. And I was like, God, I've had enough. And so in the end, I said to Lucas at the church at the time, I said, I'm not coming back to your church. I said, I'm going to go somewhere else. I just didn't want to face up to it. I didn't want to see people and go, oh yeah, he was on the gap year. And just knowing in my heart that actually I failed so badly and I just couldn't cope with it. So I just went somewhere else. And actually, God really helped me work through that, and I had to go back to the church, tail between my legs, and said, hello, I'm back, Lucas. And he's like, haven't you quit? Sure. But what is a great kind of encouragement is this book is full of people who failed, full of people who've messed up. But as we see Jesus, we see a God who restores. We see a God who doesn't just go, well, that's it, that's your chance gone. He's not a God of a second chance or a third chance. We have a God of grace and forgiveness. He restores his people, even if we think that this kind of failure is in us. And that's still a thing that you know, it just terrifies me at times. That the reason I probably don't want to get involved in the homeless thing or the mentoring is because if I start going down that route, I open up the risk that I could fail it again. I open up the risk that I could start well and fail it. And that's a stronghold. And that needs to not be in my life, because that is going to determine how I live my life. And that is not how God wants me to live. And so what we're going to do is we're going to just spend some time thinking about the real kingdom come, because it is Palm Sunday and I'm going to talk about Jesus. And because Josiah could only affect his nation at that time. You know, when Josiah died, another king came in, and that was it. But Josiah just points to a better king. And so as we know the story of Palm Sunday, where Jesus comes in on a donkey, we're talking of a better king, not a king for that generation, but a king for all time. Not a king who could just smash the high places when he was alive, but a king who can smash the high places in us now, whatever those are, whatever variety of things that we have. A king that knows what it is to feel pain and knows what it is to release people from those pain, from that pain. And I was listening to a preach recently, and it talked about when Jesus healed lepers, that he didn't just kind of, you know, when Jesus healed the kind of centurion, he said, like, literally when the centurion's kind of slave, he just said, you just need to say, and you'll be healed. Literally said, I'm a man under influence, and I say something, and people just go and do it. He said, you can do the same. I know you can. So all Jesus needed to do, this guy was saying, is say, you'll be healed, and that was it. But when he healed lepers, he didn't just kind of say, be healed. He went over and touched these lepers, because these lepers weren't just physically, you know, unclean and physically in problems. They were just stigmatised. They were out of society. And as Jesus goes and touches these lepers, he said that they would have felt just an emotional kind of wholeness. He said Jesus doesn't just want to come and heal people and help you with bits. He said Jesus wants to make people whole. And he said, so therefore he wants to make us whole. So it might be in our lives that it's not sin that we've got. It might just be that something's really hurt us, or something's really difficult, we're afraid of something. Well, Jesus would come to make us whole. He's not just come to clear out and make us behave well and just help us with the bad things that we do. He's come to make us whole. He's come to release us from all this pain and all this fear that we would have. And so Andy and Rob are just going to come up and just, they're just going to kind of lead us in a time of kind of reflection, and then just going to lead us in some music. But I'm going to kind of hand back to Graham, who's going to take over. I just want us to pray. I don't know how we're going to do this. I just want the opportunity, just to, whether people come forward or what, I don't know. I just want the opportunity for people who just think, you know what, there are high places in my life that need to go, they need to be dealt with. I want the opportunity. Sometimes we can just go, oh yeah, that's good, and we can go away and it never changes. I just want the opportunity to be able to pray with people who've just got something about fear, or something about pain, or something about something they need to kick. And just say, do you know what, we believe in a God who can change those things. And so, yeah, I'm just going to pray, and then I'm going to hand over to the guys and to Graham.